Welcome to Grit with Wisdom. This is the podcast that delves deep into the inner psyche of mountain bikers from all walks of life in order to discover the tools and the tactics that can help us have more fun out on the trails more often. Our aim here is to help you understand what it takes to push our own personal boundaries in the sport we love from a mental and emotional perspective. Our guest today on the show, Jason Bond, brings a new perspective to the conversation as a strength trainer specific to mountain bikers. Jason is also a father, a skills coach, and his strong background in racing across numerous disciplines from BMX to downhill and enduro make him incredibly passionate about building strong, well-rounded riders in both the physical and the mental spheres. His business, Bond Training, which is based on Vancouver's North Shore, specializes in guiding riders through progressive strength training workouts. Over the past 15 years, Jason has built and refined his training programs to include many of the best aspects from many other sports, from skiing to baseball. He now brings the best of the best techniques to the everyday rider. When he's not in the gym, you can find Jason out on the trails or coaching his son's BMX team. We dig into all sorts of topics during our conversation, some of which include how to prevent injury and bounce back faster, the best ways for getting stronger for mountain biking, analogies from the gym that can help us with our mindset on the bike, and what his racing days have taught him, including his mindset for racing versus riding for fun. Let's give a warm welcome to Jason Bond. Jason, welcome to the Grit with Wisdom podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here, man. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, Jake. Thanks for having me, and I'm excited to sit down and have a chance to share some of my insight with you today.
Yeah, fantastic, man. I'll tell you what, I'm glad we're sitting down today. I had the pleasure of joining you for my first gym session with yourself yesterday, and I am feeling a little bit sore in a good way today.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to be sitting here talking today instead.
You did a great job yesterday. You held your own, and yeah, it was really fun to get you into that group and to give you a chance to see what we do in the gym and how it relates to what we're doing with riding and those items. So.
Yeah, thank you, man. It was super kind for you to have me along. I had an absolute blast.
Cool.
And I can't wait to share a little bit with our listeners today about, what you do and your philosophy behind strength training for mountain biking. So, it'd be really cool if you could maybe just start out by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself. Where are you from and what is it that you do in the mountain bike world?
Okay. So my name's Jason Bond and I run Bond Training. I'm based here in North Vancouver. Grew up in a small little town in Ontario, and then as I was finishing up high school, my family moved to Kelowna, and at that point, I already had a love affair with all things two-wheeled, but mountain biking was starting to happen and starting to grow, and so in moving to the interior BC, there was lots of opportunities to ride mountain bikes, and so that started a lifelong love affair from that point forward with mountain bikes.
Oh man, that's so cool to hear. So growing up in Kelowna there, I'm sure you were exposed to kind of the free riders and that kind of thing in mountain biking?
Yeah, this was early days when, everybody had one bike and no suspension and all that good stuff. And it was a great tool to explore the mountains. I was coming from a BMX freestyle background, and at that time the sport was pretty quiet. There wasn't a lot of opportunities to compete, and for some reason I had in my head I wanted to do some competitive things. And with mountain biking at that point, there were more than enough opportunities to get into a competitive environment.
Wow, fantastic. And do you think kind of growing up or learning on such a basic bike, like a rigid mountain bike, has influenced your riding at all today?
Yeah, absolutely. It reinforced my love affair for it, and then just that opportunity to figure things out. At that point, magazines were the big way to provide information about what people were doing in other parts of the world, and not being able to see video of how athletes were doing their tricks or their stunts on the BMX bikes. You had to have, you spent time trying to figure that out and sort that out.
Right. So lots of trial and error, looking at photos, trying to figure things out.
Yeah.
Man, I've got the utmost respect for you. Kind of, I missed those days, for better or for worse, with my age. I was exposed to a lot more videos,
Right.
Which I consider myself lucky for that. But I also envy you guys because you were kind of forced to do things the harder way and put in that work.
Yeah, and sometimes it came up with alternative solutions to what people were doing elsewhere. So that was interesting as well.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. And you talked about kind of being drawn to the competitive side of cycling there as well. What was it that kind of really caught your attention?
That's a great question. I think it's multi-tiered. I think I wouldn't have been able to articulate this back then, but the opportunity to connect with others that had a similar passion for the sport. With BMX at that point, you had to travel far and wide to get to an event, but it was a great congregating place where riders from all across the country would come together, and so that was a big part of preparing for a competitive weekend. And then with mountain biking, over the years, it was a great reason to travel to various small towns across the province or across the country, and see areas that you wouldn't see otherwise, just because they were hosting a bike race and it was part of a series that you were trying to perform at. So that's been a great part of the competitive outlet, and then just the learning involved in preparing for being competitive, whether accessing good coaching or the reading and research to figure out how to improve your performance.
Yeah, so really embracing the journey. I love it. I've got to say I agree. As someone who's not naturally very competitive, I've been really enjoying doing a couple of races over the last few years just to kind of like give me a focus and, as a good excuse to go out on some bigger rides with friends, do some training.
Absolutely.
And then meet new people in different destinations.
Yeah. As I get older, having those events to train for actually keeps me on track with just continuing to keep my fitness at a level that I'm happy with and my riding with a level that I'm happy with. It's easy to get complacent about my riding, and so just having an event every calendar year that I'm training for gets me off the couch on those rainy days. So it's helpful. I also got into it in mountain biking when it was kind of a time to racing legitimized you as a rider. We live in a day and an age now where that's not necessary at all. There's certainly lots to gain from entering into a competitive environment and preparing for it. There's so much to learn that will help you as a rider and that you can carry forward into other parts of your life. But it's not, by no means is it a necessary experience for riders in this day and age. So.
Totally. Yeah, it's a really interesting point you bring up. I know we were chatting about this a little bit over a coffee the other day about the sport kind of evolving from being, centered solely around racing. And, if you wanted to make it in the industry as a professional, you had to be kind of finishing on top of the podium or fixing that guy's bike.
Sure,
whereas now there's so many other avenues to kind of, pursue within the industry, which is really cool.
Yeah, and just, it's also a great touching point on just all the different aspects that you can pull away from riding. It's good for your health. It's good for your mental health. The mechanical side, there's lots to learn and lots of people enjoy that,
Totally.
that element. I think there's a strong spiritual side to being outside and moving and jumping and playing in the woods. So there's all these wonderful aspects to riding that, and it's a great stress release, and it's a great way to explore the world we live in. So, and the equipment right now is just so good. Like it's a great time to get in the sport.
Man, I could not have said it better myself. I agree at so many levels there. And I think, a really cool point you brought up there that doesn't often get talked about in the potentially, macho world of riding bikes or extreme sports.
Yeah.
It's the spiritual side, the connection to nature. How do you find that plays out in your own riding?
Well, just the practice, of pausing, taking a moment to look at the environment you're in and take in your surroundings. I mean, it just depends on where you're at, what your headspace is. Some rides that's more important than others. There's other times where you're just looking at the clock and you're just trying to not get the ride over for the sake of completing it, but you've got another appointment after you get out on the trails, and so it's hard to sometimes make the room and the space to do that element. But when you get into the Alpine and you're surrounded by this amazing backdrop, especially here in the Pacific Northwest, it's like it's pretty humbling, and in a really good way, I think.
Totally.
It's a great time to get grounded. So yeah, that's part of it for me.
Man, I love it. Bikes are such a great tool for bringing us back to the present moment and just, taking some time to appreciate the beauty around us, be it in our life or the natural surroundings.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love it, man. So kind of growing up out east, moving to Kelowna, getting into some BMX racing and some early mountain biking. What was it that brought you here to BC?
It was
to BC,
within
to the coast, to Vancouver.
Coast. Initially, university. I came down to the Lower Mainland to do post secondary, and then I've stayed here. Like it just seemed. When I was finishing up university, I had a couple really great job opportunities in different fields, in succession, one after the other, and those opportunities were down here. They weren't back in Kelowna. And then, later in my work life, transitioned into being a trainer and wanting to work specifically with mountain bikers. At the time, there was just more opportunity down here. The sport's grown by leaps and bounds, and there's opportunity elsewhere now to do that sort of thing. But North Van was a great base, and it's where my community of riding was established anyways. So that is what brought me down here.
Yeah, fantastic, man. I just love this idea of, building a career around your passion of mountain biking. So you kind of, move into North Van, you're studying. At some stage there, I believe you became a professional mountain bike instructor?
Well, yeah, like Kelly and Darren had started up Endless Biking, and I had an opportunity to work with them. I'd already spent some time with Pedalheads for a season, which was a really interesting opportunity to work with very young children, and just there's a skill set working with that age group, and so that was fun and interesting. And then worked with another group that has since become Escape Adventures. So just had a couple opportunities in a row from season to season in a coaching environment. So and then worked with Kelly and Darren as they were starting up Endless, and it's become a really great resource in the community.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, we've got some common ground there. Yeah, working for Endless, and what a great place to just kind of dive in headfirst into the industry and experience, teaching others in this, environment where you're surrounded by so many other great coaches.
Yeah, and just even the experience and the insight from Darren and Kelly, like the opportunity to be mentored in that sort of regard is, looking back, it's an important part of my journey for sure.
Absolutely. I've got to say I agree there. Just a huge, huge part in my learnings as well.
Cool.
As a professional. So you've gone from there, working for a few companies around the North Shore coaching. What made you decide to shift into the strength aspect of mountain biking?
So we've talked about racing, and so at that point, downhill racing was becoming more and more established as a sport unto itself, and a couple buddies and I were really drawn to that, and just always trying to improve my performance, reading the articles on what people were doing back then to prepare for their downhill careers, looking at their backgrounds and stuff like that. It became, no one would come out right with what they were doing in the gym, but it became evident that was a theme for a couple of them. And in fact, locally, there was, Andrew Chandro and Dave Watson. I'm trying to think who else. But, the articles about them would show up, and, there'd be mention of them training. In fact, I think they trained with Anthony at Level 10, who's the owner of the gym we were using yesterday.
Oh, there you go.
And so just success leaves clues, and so looked into that, and that started, my introduction into how that the gym could be an important tool. I already was aware of the importance of cross training, quote unquote, But at the time, that looked more like cross-country skiing or alpine skiing or riding dirt bikes. But the gym as a training tool there wasn't a lot of information when I got started. So couldn't afford a trainer all the time. Like I hired one or two trainers in those early years just to start to learn some of the movements and what was useful, what wasn't. But then as part of that, wanting to know more, started the certification process to become a trainer myself. Not really thinking it would open up into a career, but just that it would give me more tools in preparing for competitive events. And funny enough, it was at a time when I was doing more coaching and kind of in transition for what I was doing for work. So it came on my radar that people earn a living as trainers. So so started to explore that.
Man, that's so cool to hear the background behind your current business and what you're currently doing. And just hearing how it was, solely driven by passion and wanting to get better at racing and find out, what the guys that are winning are doing there.
Yeah.
It's so cool to hear that has developed into what it is today. So that kind of brings me to the next question. I wanted to ask a little bit or dive into here about what you're doing now. Can you tell us about your business and some of the coaching sessions that you run there?
Yeah, so I'm very grateful for what I do and for the people it attracts. But I have, here in North Van, I have a program called the MTB Dryland program. It's a 6-month program that runs over the winter. It's specifically strength. And so we spend 2 sessions a week in the gym in a small group. And we have access to a great facility at level 10. And we do this progression of exercises. We start in November when the riding season's it never really truly comes to a close around here usually, but it's, the daylight's shorter and it's riding after work isn't as much an option as it is during the rest of the year. And so it's a great time to get into the gym and start doing a gym program. And then over the 6 months, we progress that from, the fundamental movements, reviewing, moving well, good form, starting to add weight and reps and volume. And then over the course of the 6 months, we just continue along this paradigm as if we're preparing for, a really competitive season. The people the program attracts these days is a range. You have people that are new to riding, have no intention of being competitive, to some of the better riders in the province, both age group and at the elite level doing the program. So it's definitely really fun to get into the gym with a group of people that have riding in common. The environment I work hard to set up is that it's a welcoming environment, and that it's kind of this philosophy that a rising tide raises all ships, and so you're cheering each other on and excited to see the progress the people you're working out with are making, because you're together 2 hours a week in the gym, and so it's a really fun experience. It creates a great community.
Totally, man. And I got to experience that firsthand yesterday, which was just awesome.
Yeah, we threw you into the deep end and you held your own. You did
but
really
I've got
well.
to say, it's kind of, a test to, how well you make people feel comfortable in that environment.
Thank you.
I came into that one a little bit nervous, feeling like I was a little bit outside of my comfort zone. And it was so cool just to feel comfortable in that zone.
Awesome.
It was amazing seeing the group of people and where they are kind of halfway through this 4-month training plan. They were moving some big weights, with really good form. Mm-hmm. And I noticed really good range of movement as well. Yeah. It wasn't kind of your classic gym environment where we're just, squatting, deadlifting, doing these kind of powerlifting moves with, no range of movement.
Yeah.
It was a really active class with a good mix of kind of like cardio moves and heavy weights as well.
Yeah, this year there's a bit of a conditioning element, but again, because we can ride year round and people have access to really good indoor equipment, with 2 hours a week, the focus is strength, the emphasis is strength. But there were definitely times where your heart rate was coming up through the roof, and that's fine too.
Totally, and that may just be a side of my slacking off over the winter as well.
No. Like I said, you held your own. You did really well. And then, what's important in that is just for the participants to be able to connect the dots with what we're doing in the gym to the activity they're doing in life in general, but back to the trail, back to the bike, back to skiing or trail running, that sort of thing. So those are all with 2 hours a week, it's important to me. There's no fluff in there. So.
No, it's great. There was certainly none of that. And I know we were chatting the other day, obviously the Dryland program runs over the winter months when we're not able to get out on the bike as much.
Yeah.
But you did mention to me, I kind of asked you, is it important to keep strength training as a mountain biker through the summer?
Yeah, absolutely. So sorry to interrupt. We do run the program over the summer with the option for people to do it once or twice a week. It's a great time for somebody that's curious about the program to just jump in and see if it suits them. It's a little less formalized as far as the progression, but the science shows like if you can get in the gym at least once every 10 days, you'll keep that strength much deeper into the season. So in general, somebody that's put in the time in their first year or even 2 years of this program, they'll keep that strength. The program ends end of April. They'll feel that strength helping their riding into May, June, and then it starts to drop off. So it works well with the season here because, by July, August, people are riding tons anyways, and that's when they're riding their best. But if they continue with once a week with the strength training, then they'll carry that strength that they've gained over the course of the winter well into August, September when we have our best riding anyways. So
I love it, man. And I think, these days we've probably all got a little bit of an idea of why strength training might be important for us in general and also for our riding. But I'd love to hear from your perspective. What are some of the biggest benefits of doing a strength training program like Dryland Mountain Bike Fitness?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of research out there on it, but anecdotally, like it moves the needle on you being more bulletproof, if that's, there's just more resilient. So scientifically, that's a hard one to prove, but, just from my own experience, by being stronger, by spending time in the gym, my joints are stronger. I'm quicker to recover from injuries.
Okay.
When I hit the ground, it's hard to assess, how much impact is involved in a crash or whatever, but I just seem to bounce back quicker than my peers. So that was indicative of where that gym stuff was helpful. And that was in the early days when I was just following a simple hypertrophy program, like a bodybuilding type program, right?
Yeah.
So there's that benefit. And then, there's the performance benefit. Like it will help you as a road cyclist or a cross country athlete to improve your watts per kilogram. Like that's the end all be all for cyclists. And that's a big one. And the gym can help move the needle on that. It's a great tool for developing power. Simple athleticism, like doing a hip hinge or a lunge. As a rider, you're not aware necessarily of how those are important movements. Or maybe, depending on your background, it took me a while to figure out how those movements were important to my riding. But the gym is a great way to develop your athleticism that will show up on a bike. So just being more powerful, being stronger. My program now attracts a lot of people that are over 40.
Okay.
And, the science shows just how important it is to keep up a strength program. And even more so if you want to be skiing and biking, into your 60s and 70s, having that strength program or a consistent strength strength training as part of your life, will help maintain your muscle mass. It'll help maintain your bone density. It helps with hormone control.
Totally.
And it just makes for a healthier life. And in this part of the world, allows you to live the lifestyle you want to lead.
Yeah.
For an additional decade or two, which I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I'm excited to go mountain biking with my grandkids, and I want to be able to do that for
Man, such an exciting thought, hey? And I think, definitely on track there. But I think as a lot of us here, living in BC or other, mountainous parts of the world, we've built our lifestyle and our life even around some of these hobbies. So the thought of not being able to do them later in life, it's one of the scariest thoughts I could think of. So it's really cool to hear that, there is tools available to increase our chance of riding into our 70s and 80s and beyond, like you're speaking about. I love it. So as a strength trainer for mountain bikers, I'd love to know, what are some of the biggest obstacles that people face in being consistent and actually getting results there off the bike that impact their riding on the bike?
Well, I know for a lot of my participants, it's just having it in their schedule, and they're really smart, successful people in their own right, and they in doing that, you often neglect your own needs to get out and exercise, or to so having it in their schedule and just being committed to their schedule, them knowing that the group and myself are going to be at the gym waiting for them, and they just have to walk into the gym and do the program. That's really helpful. That's a big asset for them. I think for a lot of us, I wasn't a natural athlete. I did play sports, but not at a high level. So, the additional training, the getting into the gym to train is pretty foreign and almost feels like oil and vinegar sort of thing, or water and oil, like just doesn't feel like it goes together necessarily. It's one of the reasons why, making the space and the environment feel really welcoming is important, because I believe quite strongly it's a really valuable tool, but I also understand it's not a comfortable place for a lot of people. So just getting over that initial hurdle is a challenge. And
totally,
there's a lot of questions around what is the right movement, or somebody told me to do this, but Instagram's telling me to do that, and I don't know if this looks right, and so that's the other thing that I think a trainer, and certainly one of the things I'm really proud of, is the opportunity to hand over the knowledge and the tools to walk into a gym and confidently do a workout and know that what you're doing is going to help your future you. Because that's intimidating, if you haven't spent time in a gym before, especially with it just.
Yeah, man, I've got to say I agree there. It felt to me a little bit like information overload when I was just getting back into the gym, trying to focus it on mountain biking, but there's so much information out there.
Totally.
I found it so hard to decipher which of these bits of advice are the right bits of advice for me.
Absolutely.
Right now. So it was really cool getting the opportunity to train with you yesterday.
Thank you. Yeah.
And really see that, right, this guy's had 15 years of experience deciphering this information down for me.
Yeah.
And now he's delivering the exact right moves for me, the exact right body weight and feedback, at the right time for my journey.
Yeah. Awesome.
That was really cool to experience. And I'm curious, obviously over your own journey of riding and throughout, the training or coaching world, you've obviously had some really good mentors of your own.
So much so. Yeah.
I'm sure you've been given lots of advice over the years, but is there any one bit of advice that kind of really stands out or sticks with you today?
Oh, man. I don't know if there's one piece of advice. I guess if we talk about specific challenges or examples, maybe I'll come up with something, but there's no one thing that stands out as a philosophy or as a tool. I think that's the beauty of what you're doing as a coach, but also a coach that's providing tools in the aspect of mental performance and overcoming challenges on the trail or in life using your brain. There's a lot of powerful tools out there that people may not be aware of, and the value of bringing in a coach is they can just see the challenge you're up against and provide one or two tools. You don't get lost in the noise, and they can hone in. The coach can hone in on what's important and just bring that message to front and center, present that tool so it's front and center, and then just walk you through it. And that, just even teaching simple skills, like I'm sure you had moments like this where I don't know, like a rear wheel lift. Like the elements of doing a good rear wheel lift on a bike are not complicated, but you can share that in a 20-minute lesson, and
Totally.
people are doing it fairly competently. That probably took me 5 years to figure out, and so that's the beauty of having a good access to a good coach or people that can share that information well is it really speeds up your learning curve.
I agree, man. And, I read a study recently. It was really interesting. It was talking about the idea of the 10,000 hour rule that we've probably all heard of. It takes, roughly 10,000 hours or 10 years to master a skill.
Yeah.
And, we all grew up, wheeling. Every night after school, we tried to do wheelies. We tried to do buddy hops, whatever it was. Put it in those 10,000 hours. And I think we can all attest that, time on the bike works.
Yep.
But what was really interesting about this study that kind of follows a similar line to what you're speaking about there is that they actually proved it is possible to beat the 10,000 hour rule by following in the footsteps of someone who has already done it and someone who is skilled in transferring those tools over to you.
Yeah.
So, like you're saying there, it could take 10,000 hours to learn a rear wheel lift, or it could take 20 minutes. And it's kind of like, are you trying everything by trial and error, or are you just trying the right things and focusing on them until you get it?
Yeah, 100%. And that 10,000 hour rule, as you know, has some serious caveats. And I think that's a big part of it is that, just doing the same thing over and over isn't like, it's important to do that when you're practicing the right skills.
Totally, yeah.
But if you don't have the right skills in place, then there's a lot of fishing around.
Yeah, you can still learn the thing, but it's going to be very inefficient.
Yeah. Yeah, and we live in a day and an age where we have a great access to high level coaching, right? Like you're achieving your PMBI certificate, gives you some pretty powerful tools that just as a standard of coaching elevates the game. So it's a great investment for riders of any level.
Absolutely.
It's a reminder to myself, actually. So.
Totally, man. Yeah, I think, talking to a lot of other coaches, we often say, we've learnt just as much about our own riding and our own skills or lack of during the instructor training course, the PMBI there.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. So I wanted to dive in a little bit here and talk about mindset. I'm curious, in your own riding, are there any mental techniques or tools specifically that you use?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the challenge in front of me. Let's see.
I'm going to get a little bit specific here.
Yeah,
you do a little bit of riding, or a lot of riding, here on the North Shore.
Yeah.
You're standing up the top of a trail, maybe in a bit of a group of riders. It might be people you haven't ridden with much before, but you're feeling a little bit nervous. You know the trail ahead's going to be technical. You can probably ride it, but you're not quite sure. Is there anything you'll do there to kind of like refocus and get in the zone?
Well, there's a number of things. If it's something we're sessioning and I'm very serious about completing it, but I'm also very concerned about the risks, I'll give myself a 3-shot rule. So especially if I'm getting airtime, like if my wheels are coming off the ground, I will want to roll into it once or twice just to judge the speed or follow somebody that's successfully doing it if I feel my skill set matches theirs. And then if I have to roll into it and I haven't completed it by the 3rd time, then I need to step away from it because mentally for me there's a lot invested in it and you start to get tired pretty quickly after that. And that's when the big mistakes happen. So I also am a big believer in in the gym, we talk about the software to do a good deadlift, a good hip hinge. And if you're doing a good hip hinge right from the start with a good foundation and you have, lots of time doing that, then it reinforces that pattern when you come under stress, like when we add more weight to the bar. And so if you can do little steps to get to that, doing a deadlift at a heavy weight, the software is in place. But if we have issues where, there's some part of that hinge that's not working for you, then we need to take a step or two back and reinstate that software. So when you're under stress, your brain knows exactly what to tap into. And so coming back to this example of, doing a drop or jumping, if I've run up to that 3 times and I haven't completed the task, then I need to take a step back so that I'm not reinforcing the software of grabbing the brakes every time I come up to the lip or really tensing up, and because that's not the software I want to tap into when I'm doing that drop or that jump. And so it's giving myself the permission to walk away from it after that. It's also giving myself, the mandate to, complete it. But if for whatever reason I'm not comfortable with that, we live in a part of the world where that drop's not going anywhere. It'll be there next ride. It'll be there a year from now. So I want to be able to ride another day. And so giving myself permission to step away from it, and then doing the homework so that I'm confident in the software I have.
That is a really great point. And I love the parallels you're drawing there between training in the gym and then being out on the bike. That's one of the things I love about the gym is it's not just about getting stronger legs, getting a stronger body.
Yeah.
It also helps strengthen our mind a whole lot as well and gives us kind of insight to different, mental methods we can apply on the bike.
Oh, 100%.
I love your point about giving ourselves permission to walk away. I think that's a huge one because so often, and I struggle with this as well, is we can kind of get caught up operating from our ego. We're like, I want to do this, or my buddies did this. I know I can do this. I have to do this. We're doing like 7, 8, 9 run-ins, and before we know it, we're not riding good. We're not operating from a good place because we're so wound up mentally.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's a huge one. And so you talk about giving yourself permission to walk away and then going and upgrading that software.
Yeah.
How would you go about it? So you're not quite ready for the drop yet. You're not quite feeling it. You're like, right, I need to go away and work on this. How would you do that?
Yeah. Well, and just in giving yourself permission, it allows you to walk away not feeling beat up because, to your point, especially as a younger rider, like, what are my buddies going to think? Like, oh man, I want to ride with this group and they're not going to invite me because I can't keep up or whatever. And so, I mean, you're also not going to be able to ride with them if you injure yourself on this drop. So, and if they're a crew that, anyways, that's besides the point. Back to your question, that's a great time to pull in a coach. For myself, I'm pretty independent most times, and so it's breaking down the skill, figuring out what it was that was my mental hurdle in that point. Maybe it's because I couldn't see the landing until I was committed, and that's, mentally a challenge. Breaking down the skill to, smaller bites. I've been spending a lot of time riding my 20-inch BMX race bike at the dirt jumps, and with my experience and my skill, I should be doing the big jumps, and I'm not. I can get down about that and beat myself up about that, or I can, come back to riding the stuff that allows me to reinforce the good skills, refine my skill, kind of that wax on, wax off. It's hard to step into the ring when you don't have the basic fundamentals, and I think if anybody's watched Karate Kid, that's one of the big takeaways, and it applies with riding, like break down the skill set and do those basics, get your fundamentals down. Again, a coach is really good at reinforcing or confirming what you're doing well and what needs refinement. In the last year or two, some of my best experiences with a coach was at the BMX track. There's 2 brothers out in Maple Ridge, the Tuga brothers, and they're very good racers. But they're also coaches, and I've had 2 instances with the older brother where he's just like, you're ready. Like, you just need to, he'd give me 1 or 2 words of something to focus on, and he's like, just go for it. Like, you don't need anything else in place to do it. And I don't know if it's the magic of his watching or what, but, I would go and do it at that point. And so sometimes it's just having 1 or 2 words of affirmation, whether it's coming from yourself or from a coach, that's just like, okay, you've got it. And, this is something you probably can speak to a lot more of, but sometimes it is having just that word or that statement where, again, your brain taps into that software and it's go time and all systems are go.
Dude, thank you for diving deep there. There's so much there that I could unpack and go on, but I'm just going to choose a couple of things here. I love what you're saying there about, there's a big jump at the BMX track. You can do it. You've got the skills. You should be doing it. So you could, on one hand, beat yourself up about that and get into this kind of avoidance cycle of self-doubt and negativity. But instead, you choose to focus on what you are doing well and what you can keep doing to get better. It's huge. And, I'm a big believer in the fact that what we focus on grows. So if we're focusing on what we can't do, it's only going to become a bigger hurdle. Whereas what you're saying there is you're focusing on what you are doing well, you're building that, you're continuing. Sooner or later, you're probably going to be able to do that big jump as a result.
And I want you to just interrupt really quickly. That negative feedback takes away the joy of what you're doing. And at the end of the day, riding bikes should be fun. Right?
Totally. I'm so glad you said that.
Why don't you take that away from yourself?
It comes up pretty much every episode, but
really?
it's so easy to forget.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get so caught up in our own head, we forget about why we're riding in the first place because it's fun. It's meant to be fun.
Yeah.
Ah, man, that's huge. And you also mentioned there, working with a BMX coach, which I think is a really important point because often we will underestimate the importance of working on our mountain biking skills off the trails in a comfortable environment or in a different environment. So I love that. And then also the point that your coach was like, dude, you've got the physical skills here, you've got the technical skills, you're, operating from a good place mentally, like it's go time. You can do this. Here's the 2 things you need to think about.
Yeah.
That's a philosophy, I employ in my own coaching and my own writing myself as well.
Awesome.
So I think, and we were chatting about this the other day, sometimes if we go into something that is a little bit nerve-wracking or, just on the edge of our abilities, it's a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
If we don't fill the space of our mind mentally, we leave that space wide open for, potentially things like doubt, fear, hesitation to seep in. Whereas if we fill that with the 2 things we need to focus on, for example, it might be like breathe and push if we're about to do a jump. It could be low and wide if we're cornering. Whatever it is that helps you, we're filling that space with commands, and that allows our brain to tell our body what to do without leaving that space wide open for anything else to seep in. So
I really like that because, there's the element too of being in a flow state, which is so important as a rider. But we're talking about something that comes up on the trail that, mentally and physically and skill-wise is another level. And so having those 1 or 2 words, isn't far off from being in that flow state. I like that idea.
Totally. And, I often find for myself that I'll go into the trail or the run with those 2 words.
Yeah.
And by the 3rd corner, I've forgotten about it. I'm, in the zone.
Amazing.
Feeling the flow state or whatever we want to call it. I find it's a really good catalyst.
Yeah.
Whereas if I go about it the other way and I'm like, hey, I just don't want to think, don't want to, I want to be in the flow state. I don't want to think.
Yeah.
Guess what? I start overthinking. So
interesting.
I know it's different for everyone, but I can definitely draw parallels on your experience there.
Very cool.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you, we talked about it a little bit, but I wanted to ask you to explain your relationship with fear whilst riding.
With fear?
Yeah.
While riding?
Do you ever experience fear? I know it's a common thing.
So much so.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, that's there as a self-preservation tool. So it's important to respect that fear. And then it's important to not let that override your abilities or your skill set. So when fear seeps in, like it's time to ask questions. What are you fearful of? Is it legitimate? Is it something you're capable of doing? Is it something you're capable of doing today? Maybe it's not. Maybe you're tired. Maybe, 2 minutes back on the trail you had a dust off that you just weren't expecting. And so you're kind of rattled by that. And so, as you're going down the trail, you're back into this kind of fear. I think what I see in a lot of riders is, when that starts to creep in, they tense up. They're not riding to their true potential. And that can affect the ride experience too. So for me, You talked about PMBI, but this was the beauty of PMBI, like and flow state and that sort of thing. But, having those tools that you get in doing the level 1, those are important elements for any rider. And so if I'm feeling fearful or I'm tensing up because of that, sometimes it's coming back to one or two parts of, what are the elements to riding well and focusing on that. When it comes to, like I said, I'm working on my dirt jumping. If it gets to a point where it's taking away from the fun of what I'm doing, then, it's taking a step back, or it's changing the scenery, or changing the focus, But again, that in doing my own coaching on the trail, like that, when you see somebody facing that, it's an important time to remind them, like, that's healthy. It's there for a reason. And so don't ignore it. Don't beat yourself up because it's there, but, think critically about how to overcome it, how to move forward.
Yeah, totally. I love that, man. Such a healthy relationship with fear that you've developed over the years. And it's, obviously kept you safe and injury-free for the most part because you're still riding.
But to that point, like as a coach that, has this toolkit for the mental aspect of riding, what insight do you have on that topic? Like that's a really interesting and multi-tiered topic. Like, how do you address that for the people you're coaching and for yourself?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I draw so many parallels with what you just said there. And first and foremost, fear is good. Fear means we value and respect ourselves. Yeah. And we talked about this a little bit before the podcast. Obviously, coming on here with the camera, the microphones is a little bit nerve-wracking for the first time. Yeah. And I was certainly nervous when I started podcasting. But, I kind of said to you in the lobby that, it's good, man. It means you're excited for this. You value
Absolutely.
this. And often we'll feel that in our mountain biking as well. We're like, hey, there's a skill or this feature we've been working on for a while.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit scared. That's a choice. That's an opportunity for us to either dive into that fear and work ourselves up and get more and more worked up and potentially, lose that opportunity or have a bad day. Or it's a choice for us to say, okay, I'm feeling some butterflies, feeling some nerves. I'm going to get them into formation and I'm going to ride this thing. And that's where, the mental skills training that I do with my clients and that I work so much on myself as well really comes into it. It's like, okay, what tools do I have in my toolkit? Yeah. Which one of them, might be good to do now? Maybe we'll sit down and do some breathing. We'll lower our anxiety a little bit to a point where we feel like, right, I'm focused, I'm ready, I know exactly what I need to do. Yeah. What are the 2 or 3 skills I'm going to focus on?
Amazing.
Okay, I'm going to breathe, I'm going to push, and I'm going to poke as I go off the job. Whatever it is. So that's a really short 5-second kind of rundown of some of the tools I'll use. Obviously, there's a lot more, that are more specific to specific people, specific situations. Yeah. But, just like riding a bike or just like doing a deadlift, the foundations are always the most important part.
Absolutely. To expand on that, like I enjoy racing, but I still get nerves when I show up at the start line. And so, again, that's not a bad thing. If you didn't have nerves, you wouldn't be at the heightened state to perform at your best, right? So a little bit of that stress, a little bit of that fear is actually healthy and will help you perform at your best because you're at this, this heightened state. In a racing environment, like I've learned to have a routine that helps me, stay in that sweet spot of like just the right amount of stress, just the right of like being focused and preparing. And, that might be something people take away from this conversation is like as a racer, there is an opportunity to create a few of these habits or just a routine. Some people would call it superstition, like put the right sock on before the left or whatever, but that will just help you get into that state of staying heightened and focused, but not being overwhelmed by the fear of it. Because
Totally. No,
Because it can be debilitating if you don't have those tools.
Can be, for sure. And I love what you said there, about the racing. I think, racing is a really good tool as well, a way of, testing our skills, whether they be mental, physical, technical, testing them under pressure.
Yeah.
I found that myself, we were chatting over coffee the other day, kind of sharing racing experiences. And I was kind of talking about the fact that, I'm not much of a racer. I'm out there for fun. But what I experienced when I got out there and started racing was I was like, man, I'm still getting these race nerves. I'm still riding like crap. And I'm like, Jake, you don't care about this. Why? Why are you getting all stiff and riding like crap? But what I realized is, whether I consciously care or not, I did. And just something about being in that race environment and having this goal of going fast was testing me.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, okay, it's time to go back to the drawing board and, put into practice some of the things that I've been, learning about and teaching others. So I think whether it's racing or just challenging yourself, maybe stepping up the bar every so often and, riding some harder features or even, trying some wheelies or some manuals or something you haven't tried before in the parking lot is a great way of, testing these mental and physical skills.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
I love it, man. And, on that subject, what's a new skill you've learned lately and how did you go about that?
Yeah, so I'm really enjoying being a dad right now, and I have 2 young boys. My eldest, Jack, is 7. Right. He's turning 8 this year, and my youngest, Harlan, is 3.5, almost 4. And, when Jack was starting to get into riding a strider and now he's on a pedal bike, it was really fun to take him to the pump track and tool around there. And, at that time, I had the option to get into a mountain bike, but a dirt jumper would have been just as well. But it was really fun to hang out at the pump track with Jack, and both of us, ride through that and have a big smile on our face. But with a little bike like the BMX or a dirt jumper, the pump track's a lot more fun and you get a lot more out of it compared to riding a big full suspension bike. There's still lots to be gained by being on the big bike, but like I said, I had the luxury of getting into a little BMX bike. And so it's been really fun hanging out at the pump track and pushing my skill set there, but also the fitness element in there. So for me, it's a skill I've had, but when you watch some of the high-level BMX racers, you realize that I'm just scratching the surface of what you can do in like a wheelie manual or a pump manual. And so that's something that I've been working on and applying it to the 20-inch versus the 29-inch wheeled bike. It's a different beast, and it's been a good challenge. So with regards to learning that, the pump track locally are great because the bumps are pretty shallow and pretty conservative, low consequence. And then learning that, being confident with it, and then applying it to with more speed, and then bringing it to the BMX track where the bumps are a bit bigger and a bit more drawn out. And again, starting off conservatively, and again, adding speed and more distance. So it's coming along. I'm not able to do more than a single set of doubles, like from one to the other. Occasionally I can do a triple on the small bumps, but
nice.
That's what I'm working on right now.
Man, that's rad. Yeah, I love that philosophy of simplifying things by getting on a smaller, shorter bike, less squish.
Yeah.
Finding a comfortable environment like the pump track, and then breaking it down into small steps, being like, okay, I'll start on the small, shallow ones, then maybe I'll move up to the BMX track.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
Yeah, totally. And as a word to anybody out there that's a parent of young children, the pump track is a great place to hang out and introduce your kids to the fun and joy of riding, but also for you to still be on the bike and get out there with them. It's great for your kids to see that's something you enjoy to do, and there's lots to learn there that will apply to your trail riding and what have you. So it's pump trucks are a great invention.
It's so cool to hear. I'm just picturing you there, with your kids, not only teaching them, but almost them teaching you as well, and just having fun out there together. It's great. What's your favorite pump track on the North Shore?
You know what? Well, Inter-River's nice just because you have the BMX track there. I think, I think I'm excited to see what the indoor facility is going to look like when it opens up. I think as great as asset for the community Inter-River is, I think when you look at, say, what Chilliwack built with their pump tracks, we missed the mark by a long shot for, what North Van is an international destination for riding, and it would be nice if we had some more international level assets in regards to pump tracks and stuff. If you ever get a chance to travel Vancouver Island, every small town has an incredible skills facility from, the Steve Smith facility. But up island at Cumberland, they have a really wonderful jump park and skate park and BMX track. And further up in Campbell River, there's a pretty good one. And popping over to Powell River on the mainland, they have a great skills park. So if that's your jam, there's some great facilities to visit around that are a couple hours from here. And in the lower mainland, I've been spending a lot of time at Invergary doing the dirt jumps there. And Richmond has a pretty good pump track and a good set of dirt jumps. So.
Nice one. That's the scoop there. So for anyone listening and wanting to improve their mountain biking skills or their pumping and dirt jumping skills, you know exactly where to head right now. I wanted to talk, a little bit here about, some of the less fortunate things that can happen as part of this sport. I'm not sure if you've experienced any big, crashes, injuries, or even just smaller setbacks during either your racing days or just your biking career in general. But I'd love to know, how do you approach this? What do you tell yourself after a crash or a setback?
Yeah, that's a great question. Or even being around people that have had big crashes. It's a reminder of, that there's great potential to be injured in the sport. Being proactive about your strength and your mobility is helpful. Being proactive about acquiring the skills, gives you confidence as well. And then just being able to safely assess the risks, knowing that risk, there's a potential to get injured just riding the trail you started on 5 years ago. That can happen. Not taking that for granted and taking the extra minute to put on the safety gear or going for the safety gear that seems a bit overbuilt for the ride you're intending to do. I never regret putting on bigger knee pads than, maybe the ride suggests. And then just mentally, just breaking it down. Maybe it's if that's getting in your head, an injury you've had or a peer, somebody close to you has had, taking a break from what, that trail or that style of riding is not a bad thing. Like I said, that stunt will be, in all likelihood, will be there next year, or, there'll be another day to ride. So in dealing with an injury, being what I see as a trainer, being proactive, pulling in experts when you can, when you have the luxury of bringing in good physio or a good doctor to look at the injury, that is worthwhile because that knowledge can be helpful. Being your own advocate in those moments, and then just doing the work to get back to being healthy. For me, I'm focused on the physical side, but there's a mental side as well. So, just that's a great time to refresh your mental skill, the mental skills in riding well.
Yeah, I love that, man. Almost seeing it as an opportunity to take a step back, refresh your skills.
I think that's it. You look at those incidents or those stages where you're dealing with an injury and look at the opportunity in that. For sure.
And it almost goes back to what you were saying earlier about, giving ourselves permission to take that step back and say, hey, look, I'm not where I was yesterday.
Yeah.
I've had a setback, but that's okay. I'm here now.
Totally.
And often it is, taking one step back for 3 steps forward. Often it comes as a bit of a gift. It's a chance to, get focused, tune up our skills, look for weak spots.
Absolutely.
And then come back stronger.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. And what has been one of the biggest, challenges or setbacks you've had over the years on the bike?
I think, as a racer, this becomes really evident if you're, or just in riding. I think resources, over the last couple of years with running my own business and having a young family, the resource of time is really scarce. And so, in being a young rider, the resource of funding, to be on good equipment and those sort of things is really, especially when in this day and age, when you compare to what, is happening on Instagram or the riders you see elsewhere, and it's easy to get down or just throw in the towel and step away from it. I think if you can come back to, we've talked about this actually, the process and focus on the process for yourself. That was important to me as a racer, especially in the early days, because if you're solely focused on results, it can be very humbling for a season or two at least, if not more. And so
I'm going to cut in there. So as a racer, if you're not focused on results, what should you be focused on?
You're seeking improvement, right? And so from race to race, I forget where this idea came to me. It was in something I read somewhere, but just this idea of focusing on the process goals. Like, I want to go to the nationals and I want to have this result, or I want to get upgraded to the next category, and that requires, attending this many races and getting these results. But you just can't always control the outcome of those results. You get a flat tire, or you didn't account for the fact that all of the Washington racers were coming up to that race, or what have you. So from race to race, one of the things you can control is the process goals. And so those elements of your performance, of your focus, that will enhance and improve your riding, and stuff that is quantifiable. So, if it's an endurance race, I'd have a fueling strategy, and I want to execute that fueling strategy. Well, at the end of the race, if you have all these gel packs on you that you carried around, the intention was to eat this much or consume this many carbs, and you cross the finish line and it's clear you've consumed half as many carbs, then you didn't execute that process goal. And what's the lesson there? Like, did you still get the result you expected, or did you finish in the back part of the pack where you didn't expect to finish? Well, maybe you weren't fueled for it. With downhill, making sure all your kit's ready, all your bike setup's done, 2 days out before you leave, and then making sure you have all the spare parts. And then within your race run, there's a corner that you want to hit a specific line. Like, did you hit that line? Like, those are things that you can quantify, either yes or no, or I did that 3 times perfectly. That, you can, at the end of the race, irregardless of your results, you can be like, that was a successful race. Like, I'm moving the needle on becoming a better rider. And then what's important within that is just doing small bites. Like, I say this in the gym all the time, but you want to play the long game. Like, if you're just consistent and take little bites along the way, you're going to get there. But if you can't be consistent, in the gym, I see this all the time. People coming in with guns a-blazing and they want to set records, and 2 weeks in, they just can't keep up with the load, or they're injured from doing too much too soon or not doing it properly. And then it doesn't matter what your ambitions and goals are. Like, as an athlete, if you can't be consistently training, you're not going to hit the levels that you're capable of. So that's some of my philosophy around it.
I love it, man. Yeah, what you're saying there is huge. Controlling the controllable, and as a result, potentially getting to reap the reward of that and getting to some of these outcomes.
Absolutely.
Like doing well in a race. Whereas if we're trying to control things like, our specific place in the race, or how cool we look on Instagram or something that, we're going to end up so stressed that we're not going to perform the actual skills required well to get that outcome. So I love it. Even, simple things like controlling our nutrition or, thinking about where our body weight is centered over the bike are so simple and so easy for us to control consciously.
Yeah.
But often we'll forget about them because we're worrying about, our place in the race or,
so much so.
where we're going for dinner afterwards or whatever.
Yeah.
That's fantastic, Matt. So some really solid processes there you've developed and worked on yourself over the years. I love it.
Thank you.
And I know, you're so modest, you probably don't like talking about this stuff, but I'd love to bring up, some of your, racing highlights over the years. I know you've done quite well there.
Well, I'm not a natural athlete. I've enjoyed the process of racing and moving the needle on my performance. I've helped support a lot of race organizers over the years with my entry fees. But yeah, like some of my best racing happened as a masters athlete.
Awesome.
When enduro was starting, I was really excited about that. I'd come off a couple seasons of doing Marathon XC, and so I had this really great aerobic base to draw from, which I think people sometimes underestimate how important that is for enduro events. And I had a good skill set from previously downhill racing. So there was one season early on in the BC Enduro Series where I did well as a master athlete. Again, that was really fun, a fun stage of like getting to go to the races with some of the guys and girls I was training, and being able to hang out. It's in this part of the world, the race community it's a great group of people, and it's a great excuse to see different trails and different riding communities. BMX has been fun, and it's been fun learning that sport, BMX racing, over the last couple of years, especially at my stage of life. The guys and girls that are doing it at this age are either brand new to all types of riding or have been BMX racing since they were 9 years old. And so those athletes are beasts at the track, and it's humbling lining up to them. It's also generally a very different body type. Like they're truly power lifters. Like if you're going to look at the body type, that's what a lot of them are, as a generalization. Whereas anything mountain biking, it's tall and lean is generally the look, but not always. DH is a range, and anyways, but the BMX racing's been fun, and it's been fun doing that with my boys. I've really enjoyed not taking just a back seat and supporting the track and supporting my boys in their racing, but also being able to get on the track with them and practice with them, and that's been really fun. I sometimes feel a little bit selfish when there's other parents that are helping with the back end of keeping the track running and stuff, but there's other ways that I try to contribute to that, and certainly grateful for their contributions to make that track run, because at the end of the day, it's been a great tool to introduce those riding skills to my boys that I know as they get older they'll carry forward. And I see it already with Jack's skiing and stuff. There's stuff he's learning at the track that it's just natural now for him when he's skiing or mountain biking. So it's pretty cool to see that.
Man, that's fantastic. And I think, you say you take a back seat there, but I think even just playing the part of being a bit of an inspiration to your kids and some of the others as well, and saying, hey, look, BMX racing and having fun on the bike isn't just for kids.
Yeah.
Like, I'm your dad and I'm still out here shredding. I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe shredding is a very, very generous comment around my riding, but I think that's one of the things I'm proud of with my riding over the years is I just enjoy being on two wheels. So, I have experience road racing. I have experience doing randonnée. I have experience doing cross racing. I really enjoy cross racing and would encourage any competitive mountain bike athlete to try that, because it's a good way to just get out of your comfort zone in the fall around here. Coming into BMX at this stage has been great. And it's, at this point in my life, it's clear there's so much that can be refined on the bike, and drawing from these other experiences has been I always bring it back to riding, but there's stuff to learn in all the different disciplines of riding. So it's been fun enjoying that process over the years, and keeps riding a mountain bike fun and interesting and engaging at this stage of my life. So
Man, that's awesome. I love it. One, you're far too modest there, but two, I think, the definition of shredding isn't necessarily, being the fastest guy on the EWS circuit or doing the biggest whip on jumps on A-line. I think shredding is about having fun.
Absolutely.
And you just hit the nail on the head there, trying lots of different disciplines, enjoying that kind of personal growth and exploration through bikes as a tool.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
what shredding is to me. Sweet. So we're going to start winding things down here. This has been a fantastic conversation. I'm really curious, is there anyone that you personally look up to in the mountain bike world?
That's a great question. Over the years, like there's a long list, I guess. I'm trying to think who these days. Locally, it's been really fun to see the talent here develop. We've got really high-level coaches coming up and helping local athletes develop for the world stage, which I think was an interesting puzzle that's been slow to have the pieces in place, but it just, with what's happening with our local downhill racers, those pieces are coming together. So it's been fun to see that happen. No one person comes to mind right now.
No, that's fair enough. I think there's so many inspiring people, especially in our neck of the woods here. It almost, brings the whole community up as a whole, as opposed to like one person standing out.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say this, one of the things that's helped my riding over the years, especially as it was for the most part done on my own without a lot of outside input initially, was looking to other sports, other industries to see what they're doing. As someone new to strength training at a time when there wasn't a lot of information for training cyclists, looking to see what other sports that might relate, what they were doing was really helpful in figuring out the tools and techniques. And the same goes for racing. Like if you look at some of the other sports out there, there's some great insight in, the mindset and the preparation that goes into being a high-level performer, that if racing is your jam, it's good to look at those other sports, not just our own, for developing your skill set, your tools. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'm glad you brought it up because, we had this conversation, or talked a little bit about this the other day, some of the parallels that you found in other sports like skiing or football for the strength training side of things. And I can definitely relate, with the mindset side of things. There's not an incredible amount of people specializing in this area yet, or information available for, psychology specific to mountain biking, mountain bike racing, free riding, this kind of things.
Yeah.
But there is a whole lot of tools that have worked for other similar sports like skiing, snowboarding, football, tennis.
Yeah, which segues nicely into I brought you a gift as a thank you for having me on your podcast.
No way, my man.
And so I wanted to give you this. You open it.
Thank
and then
you so much.
I'll explain.
I've got a feeling about what it is because you told me about this wonderful book the other day. Maybe you can explain.
Yeah, you're bang on with it.
Fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on the podcast. It's been a pleasure to sit down with you and talk to you in this format. So this book was a really important tool for me. There's been a couple along the way about just the mental side of riding and performing. And it's written by a sports psych that his analogies and his stories come from his experience, and none of them are cycling related. It's all American sports, but it's very easy to connect the dots with what we're doing as riders. And so that I think I've probably given out at least 10 copies over the last couple of years of that book. It's been a great resource, and I happily pass it along to you. I'm sure there might be a couple things in there that help you refine your tools and your what you share with your clients. So I hope you enjoy that.
Man, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It's so rad. For anyone, listening and curious about the book that Jason's gifted me, it's called Mind Gym, An Athlete's Guide to Inner Excellence by Gary Mack and David Stevens. So it sounds like there's some really cool tools here that you've used to help your riding over the years and lots of your clients as well. So I'm super excited to go home and get reading.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We'll have to compare notes down the road.
Absolutely, dude. So we've talked about all kinds of things in this conversation. It's been a great wide-ranging one that I know I've personally got lots out of, and I'm sure our listeners will as well.
Thank you.
No problem, man. You're welcome. I am curious, though, what's the biggest takeaway, if you could choose one, that you hope listeners learn or take away out of this conversation?
Enjoy the process. Enjoy the ride. There's lots of resources out there. So if you come up against hurdles, there's people like yourself that can get into the skills, but also the mental aspects of riding. There's the physiological and conditioning elements. There's a lot of tools out there. It's a great time to get into the sport, and sometimes coming up against something on the trail, the best way to address it is off the trail. And so it's a puzzle, and enjoy solving the puzzle, or just go for a ride and skip it, and it'll be there next time you go. So
totally, man. Well said. For the people listening, if anyone's curious about yourself or about the Dryland Fitness Program, where can they find you online? Yeah,
so I have my website, bondtraining.ca. And on Instagram, I'm at Bond Training, and then Facebook as well at Bond Training. We'll be doing some summer programs here locally, so that's a great time if you're curious about what we're doing to come in and check it out. And then I also offer customized gym programs for people to do on their own, as well as training programs, so the conditioning element of getting stronger and faster on a bike. So.
Right on, man. Yeah, highly recommend checking out Jason, checking out his programs. I'll put the notes to those links in the show notes below. Yeah, awesome. Man, thanks so much for joining me. It's been
Jake,
rad.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure getting to know you and to spend some time on this podcast.
What's up, guys? Just one last thing before you hit the trails. If you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to subscribe, and don't be a stranger. I'd love to hear from you about any topics, particular episodes you enjoyed, and even about any guests that you'd like to hear me have on the show in the future. You can find me on Instagram at _mind_mountain. This podcast, mountain biking, and mindset are all things that are very, very close to my heart. So I feel super grateful to be able to share these conversations with you. Much love to you all for taking the time to listen. See you next time.